Your organic food is a lie. The snack vanished from shelves overnight in Berlin, same brand, same cheerful, 100% natural burst on the front. In Ohio, the identical bag still sat at eye level. A parent turned it over twice. No red flags, no hard-to-pronounce additive, nothing that matched the warning buzzing around European news. What they didn't see, that word natural meant almost nothing here. And organic, it wasn't the shield they thought. This story follows the missing rules, the paid-for science, and the quiet relabels that keep the same formulas flowing. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to how those words were built. The labels that don't mean what you think. Start with this: in the US, natural on most foods has no binding federal definition. The FDA has offered non-binding guidance. Basically, don't add artificial colors, flavors, or synthetic substances, and don't mess with the food in a way that would not normally be expected. But guidance isn't law. There's no mandatory pre-approval, no consistent enforcement, and plenty of wiggle room for ingredients and processes that don't read as synthetic to a consumer but still rely on industrial chemistry. The USDA touches natural only for meat and poultry, and even there it usually means minimally processed, no artificial ingredients, not healthier, not pesticide-free, not clean. Now compare that with organic. That's a legally defined program run by the USDA's National Organic Program. But here's the catch. The front-of-pack headline, organic, is really 3 different categories with very different rules. If it says 100% organic, everything agricultural inside, aside from water and salt, must be certified organic. If it says just organic, at least 95% of the agricultural ingredients must be certified organic, with the remaining 5% pulled from a specific allowance list. And if it says made with organic, you're looking at a 70% threshold, still regulated, but with wider latitude for non-organic ingredients and processing aids. Processing aids are where a lot of confusion slips through. If an anti-foaming agent never ends up as a functional ingredient in the final product, it often doesn't have to be listed on the label. Same with certain enzymes and filtration aids used to make a texture work or a line run fast. Consumers never see them, but they can shape how organic foods are manufactured at scale. Even in the 95% organic category, the other 5% can include non-organic vitamins, minerals, or additives from a national list. They're for technical reasons, not because they're natural in any common-sense way. Then there's natural flavors. That phrase has a legal definition, yet it covers a lot. A natural flavor can be derived from a plant or animal source, but the extraction can involve solvents and carriers that don't show up on the ingredient list unless they're allergens. The flavor compound can be chemically identical to something artificial, and you'd never know. Shoppers see natural flavor and think real fruit. Often, it's a lab-built distillate that reads as strawberry because it's engineered to be strawberry. None of that violates the rules, but it clashes with what many people think they're buying. So why do these words move product? Because they tap into trust. For more than a decade, consumer surveys have shown that natural signals healthier and safer, even though regulators haven't anchored the term to clear, enforceable standards across the board. Organic triggers its own halo: fewer synthetic pesticides, no GMOs, better animal welfare. Some of that is true, especially at the farm level, but the halo travels farther than the law. The organic standard is primarily an agricultural standard. It says a lot about how crops are grown and animals are raised. It says far less about how a cereal is extruded, a bar is bound together, or a snack is engineered to stay crisp for 9 months. Here's where the sections of the rulebook matter. The Organic Foods Production Act defines the philosophy and outlines the guardrails. The USDA codifies them, accredits certifiers, and maintains the national list, the ingredients and processing aids allowed in organic products under certain conditions. That list is not static. Industry petitions it, stakeholders argue over it, and the National Organic Standards Board weighs in. Over time, technical allowances creep in to solve specific manufacturing problems: stability, texture, nutrient fortification. Each one has a rationale. Taken together, they help big organic scale. They also widen the gap between the farm story on the box and what happens inside the plant. Meanwhile, natural remains the wild card. The FDA asked for public comment years ago on whether to define it. Thousands of comments poured in and then nothing concrete. Companies self-police or they don't. Class action lawsuits pop up, and many end in settlements that tweak wording without changing formulas. Brands avoid the word to dodge risk, or they lean into it because it still sells. Either way, the shopper's mental model, no chemicals, healthier, simple, doesn't line up with how the system actually works. Let's make it practical. Pick up a granola that says made with organic oats. That means at least 70% of the total ingredients by weight, excluding water and salt, are certified organic. The sweeteners, oils, or crisps might be non-organic if they're within the remaining 30% and compliant. Flip to a 95% organic granola. Now the oils might need to be organic too, but that last 5% can include certain non-organic vitamins or emulsifiers from the national list. Both can say organic somewhere on the box. They are not the same thing, and none of that touches nutrition. An organic cookie is still a cookie, refined sugar, refined starch, shelf-stable fats. If 95% of the agricultural ingredients are organic, it earns the seal. It can still be ultra-processed. The label explains how it was farmed, not how your metabolism will respond. That difference, farm standard versus health promise, is the crack where most disappointment happens. People pay a premium, expect better outcomes, and sometimes feel nothing changed. So when the 100% natural snack disappears in Europe but stays here, it's not a contradiction, it's two different systems. In the US, natural doesn't lock a product to a codified standard the way organic does, and even organic has allowances that shoppers don't see. Those words didn't drift onto packages by chance. They were chosen because they work. To see why, we have to look at who helped write the rules and who benefits when they stay blurry. How big food shaped the rules. While shoppers were learning the vocabulary, trade groups were writing the dictionary. In Washington, label language doesn't arrive by press release. It moves through comment periods, petitions, and technical panels stacked with people who live and breathe supply chains. When the FDA floated questions about defining natural, the docket filled with polished submissions from food manufacturers arguing for flexibility. Keep natural broad, tie it to absence of artificial colors and flavors, avoid process-based bans that would confuse consumers. Public health comments asked for clarity, industry asked for room to maneuver. Guess which one came with data, commissioned surveys, and economic model? Follow the path money takes. A company doesn't walk into the USDA National Organic Program and ask for permission to use a specific emulsifier. It funds a consortium, hires consultants, and files a petition to place that substance on the national list with a technical review. The review is real, chemistry, agronomic need, alternatives, but the narrative is framed. Without this aid, bread collapses, yogurt weeps, infant formula separate. The question shifts from should this exist in organic to can we produce enough organic at scale without it? When the answer points to shortages, price spikes, or safety concerns, allowances get traction. Meanwhile, front groups play professor. Centers and alliances with neutral names produce white papers explaining why a narrow definition of natural would eliminate time-honored methods and why organic-compatible inputs are essential to food safety. You see references to consumer preference studies that surprise, show people don't want higher prices or shorter shelf lives. Behind those studies, PR firms and trade associations you'd recognize if you traced the tax filing. None of this is illegal. It's how modern regulation happens, through volume, expertise, and well-timed fear of scarcity. Now layer in the revolving door. A policy analyst at an agency spends years learning the weeds of food standards. A few months after leaving, they're advising a certification body or a multinational on how to pass audits, how to frame a petition, how to anticipate objections from the National Organic Standards Board. They don't break rules, they translate them. The same happens in reverse. Industry scientists rotate onto advisory panels as stakeholders to ensure practicality. Practicality is the word that moves mountains. It turns ideals into checklists. Here's a micro story. A former organic inspector told me about a grain handler whose paperwork lined up but whose volumes felt optimistic. The inspector asked for more traceability. A manager pulled them aside. Be practical, we're feeding a national program. The inspector wrote the concern. The certifier asked for corrective actions. The operation kept its certificate. Months later, cheap organic grain flooded the market from that corridor. Was that fraud? The courts say yes in some cases. But in the moment, the system treated it as a paperwork problem to fix, not a scheme to stop. The tobacco playbook shows up in tone, not tar. When independent nutrition scientists began grouping ultra-processed foods as a risk category, the response came fast. Reframe the debate around individual nutrients and personal responsibility. Fund research that finds no difference when calories and macros are controlled. Argue that processing is a spectrum and many processed foods are essential. Swap cigarettes for convenience foods. And the tactics rhyme: undercut consensus, amplify uncertainty, defend the category. On labels, that means pushing for absence claims, no artificial flavors, rather than positive disclosures about processing methods. Comment periods are where the sausage is made. For the 2015-2016 FDA request for comments on natural, thousands of submissions landed. Many consumers asked the agency to ban GMOs under natural and to include animals raised with antibiotics. Industry argued that natural should not police genetic techniques or farming practices, only the formulation. Without a binding definition, lawsuits surged. Settlements nudged wording, all natural became simply made, but formulas didn't necessarily change. The ambiguity created both marketing power and legal risk, and the biggest players could afford both. On the organic side, the national list grew in the gray areas. Nutrient fortifications for baby foods, processing aids for wine, cellulose to keep shredded cheese from clumping, potassium citrate for acidity control. Each allowance had a sunset review, public debate, and a reason. Taken one by one, they solved a problem. Together, they built an industrial organic that could sit on a truck for days and on a shelf for months. The farm standard remained strict. The factory standard got more technical and less visible. Meanwhile, importers and brokers pressed for lighter oversight to keep supply flowing. Certifiers overseas varied in rigor. Domestic farmers watched prices sink when suspiciously cheap organic shipments arrived. Advocacy groups begged USDA to tighten the net. It took years and headlines about multi-million-dollar grain fraud for the agency to issue its strengthening organic enforcement rule, which finally required certification for more handlers and brokers, deeper audits, and better traceability. Notice the pattern. Enforcement followed exposure, not the other way around. The result is a rulebook shaped by two forces that rarely align: the idealism of organic pioneers and the logistics of feeding a continent. Industry didn't just adapt to those rules, it helped write them, carefully, strategically, and always with an eye on price, shelf life, and market growth. While shoppers held onto words like natural and organic, the definitions behind them moved inch by inch toward what the system could deliver at scale. The price of a halo. Walk down any aisle and you can spot the halo from 10 feet away: muted greens, craft paper browns, a hand-drawn leaf. That look commands a premium. Over the last decade, organic and natural created a tier of food where the same shelf space earns higher margins because the story on the box adds value. Retailers love it because it lifts the whole category. Brands love it because it turns commodities into identity. And shoppers, convinced they're buying a safer path, pay more without seeing what the money is actually buying. Here's how the premium gets built. First, marketing wraps a farm philosophy around a processed product. A cereal box shows dew on oats, not an extruder. A snack talks about soil health, not anti-foaming agents. Second, price anchors shift. Once a shopper accepts that organic means better inputs, the brand nudges a 50-cent spread into $1, then $1 into $2. The edges feel justified, pesticides avoided, animals treated better, ecosystems protected. Some of that is real, but the halo also covers the basic business math. Higher gross margins fund higher trade, spend to keep the halo at eye level. Private labels saw the opportunity and sprinted. When a national brand pioneers an organic granola at $5.99, a retailer's own brand arrives at $4.49 with similar cues and a seal in the corner. Multiply that across sauces, broths, snacks, baby food. Category by category, store brands captured the look, copied the claims, and undercut the price. That sucked margin out of branded players and pushed sourcing pressure upstream. To meet weekly pose at scale, buyers needed volume from certifiers willing to move fast. Organic but cheaper sounds like a win for shoppers. In procurement, it can mean collapsing buffers that kept fraud at bay. Retailers added their own in-house standards. Extra checklists printed on glossy brochures, no artificial preservatives, no synthetic colors, clean ingredients. The effect was a curated moral map for the store. In practice, supply constraints forced exceptions. A retailer might require organic cane sugar but allow non-organic lecithin if the organic version is short. They might ban a certain preservative but allow a functionally similar processing aid that doesn't need to be labeled. The standards read simple. The sourcing reads like triage. When the shelf is empty, rules bend quietly to keep velocity up. Where the halo meets the courtroom, the language gets careful. All-natural lawsuits surged when consumers learned natural flavors weren't strawberries in a blender. Some cases forced payouts, many pushed brands to tweak phrases. Simple ingredients, no fake stuff, nothing artificial. Judges frequently asked, would a reasonable consumer be misled? Courts didn't redraw the term, they arbitrated misunderstandings case by case. Settlements bought time and taught copywriters new synonyms. The formulas often stayed the same. Meanwhile, the human math rarely adds up like the ads imply. Micro-story. A family in Phoenix cuts their grocery bill in half by ditching takeout, then spends the savings on organic versions of their staples, cereal, snack bars, yogurt tubes, veggie chips. 2 months in, nothing feels different. The dad says his energy's the same. The mom's migraines haven't shifted. Their kid still bounces off the walls after soccer. They thought organic would move the needle. Their cart was still 80% ultra-processed, just with better sourcing and friendlier fonts. The premium paid for upstream farming practices, not a different metabolic destiny. This is where lawsuits and expectations collide. When a natural soda faces a class action because it contains citric acid produced via fermentation, the legal question isn't health, it's semantics. When an organic cookie gets dragged for containing too much sugar, the court looks at compliance, not nutrition. Whether a brand settles or fights, the outcome rarely changes the category. A new tagline appears. The halo endures. Margins tell their own story. In earnings calls, companies point to mix, selling more premium items that lift average price. The mix story works when consumers believe the premium has substance. The risk is a trust cycle. One headline about a fraudulent organic grain shipment, one investigation into flavor chemistry behind a natural label, and shoppers hesitate. Retailers respond by doubling down on curated seals and end cap experiences. Farms stand displays inside fluorescent aisles. It keeps the story close and the questions far. Sourcing pressure is the silent squeeze behind the halo. Private label growth means bigger, cheaper orders. Cheaper orders require scale. Scale pulls supply from further away. Long chains increase opacity. A broker who was optional 5 years ago becomes essential. Paper trails stretch. Audits lag. The halo's brightness at the shelf is inversely related to the shadows in the chain. You can see it in small moments. A buyer asking if a supplier can meet cost targets without losing the seal. A supplier asking a certifier if a substitute emulsifier is functionally equivalent for their organic line. Or why does the halo survive? Because it still signals a set of values most people want to support. It's easier to buy better than to cook differently. It feels rational to pay the toll at the register rather than spend time decoding processing levels and ingredient lists. And to be fair, some of that money does support better practices on farms. But when the halo stretches over an ultra-processed product, you're mostly financing a story architecture. Design, placement claims that comfort. The farm is in there somewhere. So are the vats, the sprays, the steam-injected tunnels that make crispy things stay crispy. The premium doesn't vanish on its own. It unravels when expectations meet outcomes. And that's when the global game starts to matter. The global game. Imports, standards, and substitution. While the halo held on the shelf, something else was moving quietly across oceans: paper. Organic at scale depends on documents traveling faster than grain, beans, spices, and oils. Certificates, transaction certificates, bills of lading, equivalency forms. A shipment of organic soy from the Black Sea doesn't roll into a Midwestern mill without a stack that says every hand that touched it was certified. In theory, each link is verified. In practice, a single weak link, a broker exempted from certification, a translator for hire, a certifier with too many clients, can turn a field of conventional crops into organic on paper by the time it hits a U.S. port. Equivalency agreements were supposed to make this easier. The U.S. shook hands with the EU, Canada, and others to say, essentially, your organic equals our organic. It streamlined trade. It also masked the seams. Where standards diverged on animal welfare details, on hydroponics, on inputs tolerated under emergency uses, equivalent didn't mean identical. A grain that cleared one country's threshold could ride an equivalency bridge into the US with a seal that looked the same to a shopper, even if the path there would have failed a domestic audit. The result was an opening, and people stepped through it. Federal cases have since detailed schemes where conventional grain moved through Eastern Europe and the Black Sea region, collected forged or laundered certificates, and landed in the US as organic at a 30 to 50% premium. Paper looked clean. Volumes looked miraculous. Domestic farmers watched bids collapse because organic supply suddenly seemed abundant and cheap. The premium that was supposed to reward harder farming turned into arbitrage. A paperwork spread harvested by middlemen who never saw a field. Testing didn't save the day because testing can't carry the load. Pesticide residues dissipate. A sample drawn at the port can come up clean even if the crop saw sprays months earlier. Spot checks capture moments, not systems. DNA can tell you the species, not the farming practice. Auditors can trace lots backward through invoices, but when the chain includes shell companies and brokers that weren't required to be certified, the trail goes cold a continent away. That's not a failure of one test. It's the limit of trying to verify intent with chemistry and paperwork alone. 3 years before the Ohio parent read that natural labeled twice, a port inspector on the Gulf stared at a manifest that didn't add up. The vessel carried organic corn with yields on paper that beat local agronomic reality by a mile. The inspector asked for additional documentation. The broker produced it, stamped, translated, plausible. The shipment cleared. Months later, an indictment named the corridor the companies the markup. In the gap between suspicion and proof, the market had already moved. USDA's response came in rules, not headlines. The strengthening organic enforcement rule, finalized in 2023, forced more of the invisible middle into the certification net. Handlers, brokers, traders that used to live just outside the fence. It tightened record-keeping, expanded unannounced inspections, and required more robust supply chain audits. It didn't turn border agents into agronomists, but it narrowed the lanes where paper could be laundered. For honest operators, it meant more paperwork and more cost. For fraud, it raised the price of doing business. Even with tighter rules, complexity is a feature. A U.S. yogurt maker might source organic milk domestically, organic sugar from Latin America, organic fruit puree from Europe, and a stabilizer from a supplier that buys globally. Each ingredient carries its own chain and its own certifier. One out-of-scope handler in any link can jeopardize the whole claim, so brands lean on trusted brokers who promise clean paper. Trust becomes a service you purchase, and it's only as strong as the next audit. Meanwhile, equivalency keeps introducing quiet mismatches. Hydroponic produced certified organic under US rules can run into philosophical roadblocks in Europe, where soil is central to the idea of organic. Animal welfare steps forward in one jurisdiction and stalls in another. Emergency pesticide exemptions appear after a bad pest year and then sunset inconsistently. To a shopper, the seal is a seal. To a sourcing team, the same logo sits on top of different compromises depending on the route. Substitution isn't always a villain's move. Sometimes it's survival. A crop fails, a port clogs, a war closes a shipping lane. A manufacturer calls their certifier to ask if they can switch from organic sunflower lecithin to organic soy lecithin for a quarter without relabeling. The answer depends on formulation thresholds, prior approvals, and whether the substitute triggers allergen. Do that juggling act across dozens of SKUs and dozens of ingredients, and the probability of a paperwork error rises. Not fraud, just friction. But in the market's eyes, every paperwork headline sounds the same. What changed most after the fraud cases wasn't the word organic. It was the burden of proof. Honest grain growers pushed for identity-preserved systems, sealed lots, tamper-evident tags, verified weight reconciliations at every handoff. Some buyers started demanding residue testing as a screen, knowing it can't prove organic but might catch outliers. A few experimented with satellite monitoring for crop patterns and blockchain for traceability. Then learned that technology can track a lie as efficiently as a truth if the first entry is wrong. The global game runs on distance and trust. Distance lowers cost and increases risk. Trust lowers friction and is fragile. In the aisle, the halo looks local and simple: barns, fields, farmers' hands. In reality, the seal you're paying for is a promise that a long international choreography held its form from field to forklift to filler head. Most days it does. Some days it doesn't. And when it breaks, the fix arrives as another rule, another audit, another fee. Costs that roll right back into the premium at the shelf, inside the plant. Processing aids and technical additions. Walk through a modern organic facility and you'll hear a language that never reaches the label. Dose the antifoam, kick on the enzyme, swap the carrier. These are the processing aids, inputs used to make food behave in tanks, pipes, and ovens, then filtered, volatilized, or diluted away so they're not considered ingredients. If they don't have a functional effect in the finished product, they often don't need to be listed. The line keeps moving, the label stays clean. Foam is a constant enemy. When you boil sugars, proteins, and starches at scale, foam crawls up stainless steel walls and steals headspace in vessels calibrated down to the liter. The fix is a droplet of antifoam, often a silicone-based compound approved for use at trace levels, sometimes an organic-compatible alternative like organic sunflower lecithin. It breaks bubbles, protects pumps, and spares a midnight cleanup. Ask a worker what it's called on the batch sheet and they'll say processing aid does not carry. If it does its job right, you never see it, and neither does the label. Texture is another battlefield. To make an organic yogurt that's glossy and spoonable, manufacturers lean on cultures and time. But to keep the line moving and the cup set consistent, they may add pectin or locust bean gum, fully disclosed when used as ingredients, or they rely on enzymes to tweak proteins so the gel doesn't weep. An enzyme can be considered a processing aid if it's used to catalyze a reaction and then denatured by heat. It did something in the vat. It doesn't function in your spoon. The label tells you cultured milk. The plant remembers the enzyme by lot number. Natural flavor is its own umbrella. The law says it must start from a plant or animal source. It does not say you'll recognize the pathway. A flavor house might steam distill strawberry compounds from a ton of fruit, then stabilize those volatiles on a carrier, ethyl alcohol, propylene glycol, triacetin, glycerin. In organic products, that carrier has to meet organic rules, typically organic ethyl alcohol or glycerin from certified sources. The solvents used upstream to extract the compound may be flashed off. The finished flavor becomes a few drops per serving, functionally natural, emotionally confusing. Shoppers picture puree. The line doses a clear liquid that smells like a June field. Sanitation sits in the shadows because it has to. Every 12 hours or sooner if a sensor flags biofilm, crews run a CIP, clean in place, cycling hot water, caustic, acid, and quats or parasitic solutions through closed loops. Residues are monitored in rinse water and on test swabs. In organic plants, sanitizers must comply with the national list, and the contact surfaces must be adequately rinsed before food returns. There's always a conversation about residuals. Did we rinse long enough? Did a few ppm linger? If the answer's yes and it's compliant, production restarts. None of it hits the ingredient panel. All of it determines whether the next batch is safe. And there's filtration. To polish juice or wine, operators run product through diatomaceous earth or perlite beds. Those filter aids don't end up in the liquid, at least not above a threshold, and so they live off-label. If the juice is organic, the filter aids must be allowed. If the goals include clarity, brightness, and shelf stability, the aids are non-negotiable. Organic says the fruit was grown without prohibited pesticides. It never promised the wine wasn't filtered through ancient sea skeleton. The difference between organic approved and organic compatible is where confusion hides. Approved means the substance appears on the national list or is otherwise permitted within the regulation. Compatible is how operators talk about materials that aren't prohibited and don't contact food, or that are used in ways the rule treats as outside the ingredient universe. An example, a non-food lubricant used on a conveyor motor, specified as H1 food grade so incidental contact won't harm. It's not in the product, it's a risk-managed surround. Another example, a defoamer that's certified organic for use in a 95% organic soup, but swapped to a conventional equivalent for the non-organic line on the same day. Same valve, different paperwork, rigorous cleanouts in between. The public never sees the dance, QA does. A worker once told me about an ingredient that doesn't count. It was an enzyme blend they added to an organic cereal syrup to keep it flowing on cold mornings. We use it at parts per million, he said. By the time it's baked, it's dead. The label doesn't change. He wasn't hiding a crime. He was describing the difference between how food is made and how it's described. In the QC lab, they tracked the enzyme lots as tightly as the oats. In the marketing deck, the slide read, just oats, honey, and salt. None of this implies a plot to deceive. It shows the distance between a farm standard and a factory reality. The organic rulebook explicitly allows certain processing aids, cultures, and sanitizers because without them, lines would slow, waste would rise, and microbial risks would climb. The question is whether shoppers understand that allowance when they pay the premium. Most don't. They think organic means fewer invisible decisions. When brands try to push past the minimum, no quats, no silicone antifoam, no flavor carriers, they discover the enforcement void. A certifier might applaud the effort. A retailer might not budge on shelf life demands. If the cookie stales faster or the yogurt weeps more, returns spike. The choice becomes, keep the promise and lose the slot, or keep the slot and use the tools the rule permits. A few choose transparency, printing QR codes with audits and aid lists. Many don't, because the code isn't required, and the risk is consumer confusion. Inside the plant, the label meets physics, microbiology, and time. Processing aids are the unsung cast that keeps that meeting from falling apart. They're legal, often necessary, and rarely visible. And when a company decides to go without them, it doesn't just fight contamination and foam. It runs into a marketplace that measures virtue in seals, but enforces outcomes in return. When brands try to do it right, meanwhile, a handful of founders tried to make the label match the kitchen. A small team in Minneapolis launched a clean label snack with 5 ingredients they could pronounce in public: organic oats, organic honey, sea salt, nuts, and fruit. No natural flavor, no antifoam, no lecithin. Their first 10,000 bars sold fast. Their 11th batch stuck in the wrapper jaws. Without a trace of emulsifier, the nut oils bled in warm weather. A case sat in a delivery van on a 95-degree day and fused into a block. The shelf life target the retailer wanted, 9 months, looked like wishful thinking. They went hunting for supply. Organic nuts were tight after a frost. Organic honey spiked because of a recalled shipment that rattled buyers. Their broker offered a fix, switched to an organic syrup blend for flow and a drop of organic sunflower lecithin for consistency. Both were allowed under the 95% rule. Both carried organic paperwork. The founders hesitated. "If we add them, the label changes," one said. The broker replied, "Your label still says organic. Your returns drop." It was a business truth dressed in compliance. They tried a different path, more labor instead of more chemistry. They shifted to small batch mixing and chilled the syrup before depositing. It worked until a purchase order jumped from 500 cases to 3,000. The hand fix didn't scale. Returns climbed when bars crumbled on store shelves. The retailer warned them, improve stability or lose the slot. The company faced a clean choice that wasn't clean at all. They called their certifier. Could they add organic lecithin and keep the organic panel? Yes, if declared within formulation thresholds. Could they avoid natural flavor by using organic vanilla extract? Yes, but the price tripled and supply was erratic. They priced a batch with real vanilla. The margin fell below zero. Investors nodded toward practicality. The founders stared at the gap between story and survival. Some brands outsourced the answer to a stricter seal. They added third-party certifications: Regenerative Organic for farming practices, Non-GMO project for inputs, animal welfare approved for their dairy line. Each seal had strengths: rigorous farm audits, animal care details, soil building requirements. Each came with fees, inspections, document pulls, and the same bottleneck: paperwork is only as strong as the weakest link. A farm could pass with flying colors while the co-packer still leaned on the same processing aids everyone else used. The seals protected the field. The factory remained a negotiation. Retailer audits promised accountability. The founders welcomed an unannounced visit. The auditor walked the line, checked sanitation logs, pulled SOPs for allergens. They approved the plant and flagged a small issue with raw nut storage. The report read solid. On the way out, the buyer asked for year-round supply and a winter promo. The founders did the math. To deliver, they needed a second fruit supplier overseas with a longer season and a broker to bridge paperwork. Integrity now meant taking on risk they couldn't see. They started answering customer emails like letters. A mom wrote, "Why did you add sunflower lecithin?" The founders explained the stickiness, the melt, the waste, the food safety risk of hand rework. They included a lot number, a test result, and a photo of a failed run. Another customer asked for 0 gums, 0 carriers, 0 anything technical. The team laid out trade-offs: faster staling, more crumbling, higher cost. They lost a few purists and gained a small tribe that liked being told the truth. Then came the matrix every honest brand builds in private: shelf life versus waste, Texture versus cost, purity versus availability. They ranked decisions by risk. Food safety never budged. Label simplicity bent when physics demanded. They created internal bans, no quats on food contact surfaces, even if allowed. No silicone antifoam unless a boilover threatened a shutdown. They swapped to organic alcohol carriers for any natural extract. It didn't make the product a salad, but it made the compromises visible to them, if not to the shelf. The co-packer pitched them on organic-compatible processing. The plant could run their bars on a dedicated day, purge lines with certified procedures, and log every aid used. The founders asked for a copy of the sanitation chemistries and the carrier specs for flavors used in other runs. The co-packer blinked. No one asked that much. They shared anyway. Trust became a contract, and the contract became a habit. Finally, they chose to print a QR code. Scan it, and you saw batch-level audits, ingredient origins, and a short note on processing aids, what they avoided, what they used, and why. A retailer warned them it might confuse shoppers. The founders kept it. Returns fell as storage improved, and so did emails accusing them of hiding. The product still wasn't perfect. It was honest enough to survive. But every step toward purity cost time, money, and leverage. The more transparent they became, the harder it was to hit mass-market expectations. Which leads to the biggest confusion of all. The word people trusted most to guarantee everything was never built to do that job. Organic begins on a farm. It doesn't end your compromises in a plant or your decisions in a cart. What organic actually guarantees and what it doesn't. Organic starts in dirt. That's the promise. Certified farms avoid most synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, skip GMOs and sewage sludge, and build soil with rotations, cover crops, and manure or compost. The standard is explicit about what you can't spray and what you can feed, and it requires records for all of it: seed sources, input logs, field histories. Inspectors walk the ground, pull invoices, and match what's on paper to what's growing. At that level, organic is concrete. It's a method of production with lines you're not allowed to cross, but the guarantee narrows as you leave the field. Organic doesn't measure fiber or protein. It doesn't set limits on sugar or sodium. It doesn't score processing level. You can take organic wheat, organic sugar, and organic oil and extrude, puff, glaze, and bag them, and it's still organic if the inputs comply. Your metabolism doesn't care that the corn was grown without glyphosate if the final form is a sweetened corn ring engineered to vanish in your mouth. The seal answers, how was it grown? Not, how will your body respond? On livestock, the rules get granular and gray at the same time. Organic animals must eat organic feed, can't receive antibiotics for growth or routine prevention, and should have access to the outdoors. The pasture rule lays out days and dry matter intake for ruminants. In practice, outcomes vary. Some dairies graze broadly, some confine and meet pasture minima with tightly managed windows. When an animal gets sick, the standard requires treatment, even if antibiotics disqualify it from organic sale. That's humane, but it also creates pressure to manage illness without drugs, which can lead to debates about what preventive care looks like. On paper, the line is clear. In barns, it's a juggling act. The pesticide conversation is where misunderstandings multiply. Organic farmers can use certain natural pesticides, things like neem, pyrethrins, copper, and sulfur, under strict conditions. Natural doesn't mean harmless by default. Copper accumulates in soil. Pyrethrins can hit non-target insects. The standard's logic is hazard plus context, allowed materials used as a last resort with mitigations. Residue testing helps screen outcomes, but it's not a smoking gun. Many conventional crops test low, and many organic crops test clean, yet residues alone can't prove method. That's why certification relies on process and paperwork more than a single lab number. Fortification and the national list bring us back to factories. Organic rules allow certain vitamins and minerals in specific products, infant formula, some cereals, because public health priorities and product stability collide. You'll see ascorbic acid, tocopherols, or vitamin D if they're listed, and sometimes they're part of that up to 5% in a 95% organic product. The logic is, protect infants, prevent rancidity, stabilize pH to a shopper. It can look like additives inside a halo. To a plant, it's the difference between safe, consistent food and returns. Hydroponics and soil are a philosophical fault line. The U.S. allows certain hydroponic operations to be certified if they meet rule requirements. Many organic advocates argue that without soil, you've missed the point. The fight hinges on what organic was built to defend, soil ecology, or input substitution. Meanwhile, a consumer in the aisle sees identical seals on berries grown in living beds and berries grown in carefully managed nutrient solutions. Both can be compliant. Only one fits the original soil-centric vision. Animal welfare reforms have moved slowly. The Organic Livestock and Poultry Standards Rule aimed to tighten space, outdoor access, and transport rules. Deadlines slipped, lobbying surged, then updates landed years later with compromises. Inside that lag, brands used imagery that implied higher welfare than the baseline required. Some farms delivered it, others met the minimum. The seal didn't distinguish the nuance. Third-party animal welfare labels tried to. So what does organic reliably buy you? A farm-level commitment, no synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, no GM seeds, a ban on most synthetic pesticides, restricted antibiotics and hormones, and a paper trail that auditors can follow. It often buys you low or average pesticide residues and supports practices that build soil carbon and biodiversity relative to conventional baselines. What it does not buy you is a guarantee against ultra-processing, overeating, or blood sugar spike. An organic lollipop is still a lollipop. Here's the trap marketers set, sometimes unintentionally: health washing. A cookie with the seal feels better, so you eat two. A juice box with organic fruit concentrate reads cleaner than soda, so you pack it daily. A frozen meal with organic cream and organic flour looks gentler than a conventional one, so it becomes a habit. Inputs improved, patterns didn't. The body notices pattern. None of this lets conventional agriculture off the hook, and none of it erases the real wins. Fewer synthetic pesticides in farm workers' air, fewer antibiotic-resistant bacteria pressures in livestock systems, more habitat in diversely managed fields. The mistake is turning those wins into a universal health claim for anything that carries the seal. Organic is a strong agricultural standard with clear edges. The hype turns those edges fuzzy. So the next time the seal sways you, ask two questions: how processed is this? And what exactly did organic change here? If the answer is it improved inputs, not structure, adjust your expectation. Keep paying for better farming when you can. Don't let a farm standard stand in for a health plan. The marketing machine and the psychology of trust. Color does half the talking before you read a word. Soft greens and craft browns whisper earth. A matte finish suggests restraint. A single leaf icon on the corner of a box cues virtue more efficiently than a paragraph. Packaging designers know this because they test it. Eye tracking studies show pupils pause longer on greens for health, reds for danger or treat, blues for clean. Put a wheat stalk against a beige background, and a shopper's brain fills in fields, wind, hand. The industrial line disappears under a pallet. Claims don't arrive one at a time, they stack like armor. Organic sits next to non-GMO, which sits next to gluten-free, no artificial flavors, and small batch. Each claim answers a different fear: pesticides, genetic tinkering, discomfort, chemicals, scale. Together they create a force field. It doesn't matter that gluten-free means nothing on plain water, or that non-GMO on a product with no GMO analog is redundant. The pile signals diligent. If they cared enough to check 5 boxes, they must have checked the others you can't see. Absence claims are the cleanest trick in the book. No high fructose corn syrup lands even if the substitute is cane sugar. No artificial colors lands even if color comes from concentrates that behave the same in your bloodstream. The brain hears a removal and rewards the whole item. It's a kind of halo math. Subtract one demon, add an angel. Marketers lean on it because it's legally defensible and emotionally powerful. You feel like you took a step back from a cliff without moving your feet. Then there's the placebo effect on taste. In blind tastings, a control group compares 2 identical yogurts. Label one organic, pasture-raised, no added sugar, and the other regular. Suddenly, people find the organic one creamier, fresher, less sweet, even when they're tasting the same sample twice. The label primes the palate, set expectations, and the brain meets them halfway. It's not deception, it's psychology. Brands bank on it to justify price. You think you're paying for flavor. Often, you're paying for the story that unlocks it. Influencers and farm tour add human faces to the halo. A creator spends a day on the farm, feeds a calf, picks a berry, films golden hour over rows. You don't see the co-packer where those berries become paste, the tanker trucks, the flavor lab stabilizing natural notes so they survive pasteurization. A retailer invites buyers to visit a supplier during harvest. The fields look immaculate. Off camera, a tote of approved sanitizer sits by the packing shed because microbes don't care about sunsets. The curated slice is true, it's just not the whole. Micro story, a crew sets up a photo shoot in an orchard. Wooden crates, a vintage truck, baskets overflowing with fruit. On the edge of the frame, someone nudges a gray container out of view, and a loud fungicide wash used post-harvest to keep molds in check. No one's breaking rules. They're composing a feeling: abundance, purity, continuity. The wash is part of that continuity too. It just doesn't photograph well. Language does fine grain work. Crafted, artisan, slow, kettle-cooked. None of these terms are regulated. They smuggle process implications without making promises. From our family to yours suggests scale that doesn't exist once a product hits national distribution. Kitchen-inspired is the giveaway, something that wants to be a kitchen but had to become a plant to exist at volume. The copy's job is to bring the plant closer to the kitchen in your head. Meanwhile, categories learn and imitate. One brand wins with muted tones and hand-drawn typography. 6 more appear by spring. A shopper scans a set and feels alignment. Everyone here must be doing the right thing. Private labels mirror the look with precision, and the gestalt becomes the message. This corner of the aisle is safe. The seal becomes a chorus. The individual voice fades, and the design language does the persuading. There's also a moral shortcut at work. When you're tired, busy, or overwhelmed by options, you outsource judgment to heuristics, short rules of thumb, organic seal, better, non-GMO butterfly, safer, brown bag texture, less processed. The brain loves shortcuts, they save time. Marketers don't invent the shortcuts, they surface them, amplify them, and make them easy to see from 6 feet away. It's not mind control, it's good retail physics. Brands sanitize their own supply narratives because complexity breaks the spell. A journey of your berry map stops at the co-op, not the evaporator. A Meet Our Farmers reel avoids winter when inputs get hairy. When a campaign shows the line, it shows the parts that look like a kitchen: mixers, hands, trays, not the CIP cycles and hazard analyses. Consumers say they want transparency. What they reward is reassurance. The smartest marketers give just enough detail to feel honest, without inviting friction. All of this collided with lawsuits and new rules. As natural got litigious and organic fraud made headlines, brands changed tone: fewer absolute words, more no artificial. Regulators tried to draw lines, then politics arrived. Agencies asked for comments, then took years to move. Courts decided what a reasonable consumer might believe, one case at a time. While that was happening on paper, in stores the green and brown orchestra kept playing, and shoppers kept conducting with their carts. Here's the quiet shift. The more confused people felt, the more they relied on familiar cues. Confusion didn't kill the halo, it deepened it. If you don't trust the system to be clear, you grab the most trustworthy-looking option and move on. That's how the marketing machine survives turbulence, by giving you a safe island of signals when the sea feels rough. But signals can't carry meaning forever. They need standards underneath them, guardrails that justify the trust. Regulators stepped back in with thicker rulebooks and tighter audits. And that's where the story heads next, into the rooms where definitions get drafted, deadlines slip, and goalposts move while the aisle keeps humming. Regulators, courts, and the moving goalposts. Regulators didn't wake up one morning and tighten every bolt. They moved after the ground shifted under them. On paper, the USDA's organic standard looked sturdy: farm plans, accredited certifiers, the national list, annual inspections. In practice, the system ran on trust and time. Both were in short supply. Complaints piled up: cheap, organic, grain deflating prices, puzzling imports clearing ports, labels stretching meaning. The agency opened listening sessions, formed working groups, and missed deadlines. By the time the biggest rule update finally arrived, it read like an admission. The gaps everyone warned about were real. That update was the Strengthening Organic Enforcement Rule, SOE, finalized in 2023. It did a few simple, powerful things. First, it pulled the middlemen into the tent. Brokers, traders, and some previously exempt handlers now needed certification, closing the door that let paper convert conventional to organic mid-journey. Second, it tightened documentation, standardized import certificates, stronger chain of custody records, and supply chain audits that actually follow product through multiple hands. Third, it raised the bar on oversight: more unannounced inspections, better training for inspectors, and clearer expectations for residue testing as a risk screen. None of this reinvented organic. It enforced what people thought was already happening. Why did it take so long? Partly bureaucracy. Rulemaking in the federal government crawls. Drafts, comments, revisions, economic analyses, more comments. Partly politics. Every added requirement is a cost, and costs have advocates. Expanding certification to brokers sounds obvious if you're a farmer undercut by phony grain. It sounds heavy-handed if you're a small importer juggling thin margins. The longer the delay, the more fraud found room. Cases out of the Midwest and the Black Sea region showed how lucrative the gap was. Tens of millions skimmed by turning paperwork into profit. Courts played a parallel game with natural. The FDA never issued a binding definition, just guidance. That left a vacuum lawyers could fill. Class actions swarmed labels that said all natural while using citric acid produced by fermentation or evaporated cane juice instead of sugar. Judges asked a narrow question: would a reasonable consumer be misled? Sometimes the answer was yes, and a settlement funded refunds and new phrasing. Sometimes no, and the case fizzled. What didn't happen was a national standard. The courtroom became a patchwork dictionary. States tried to draw their own lines. Attorneys general pressed cases against deceptive green claims. But the minute a state stepped too close to a federally regulated lane, preemption arguments arrived. Food labeling is largely federal turf. States can police deception. They can't rewrite definitions Congress handed to agencies. That standoff produced a lot of signals and not much uniformity. Brands learned to avoid absolutes, trim superlatives, and move a claim from the front panel to the back where fewer eyes wandered. Meanwhile, the National Organic Standards Board kept grinding through petitions and sunset reviews. Hydroponics became a long-running fight, sole-first advocates versus operators meeting the letter of the rule without a shovel. Animal welfare upgraded in inches, transport times, outdoor space, stocking densities, while large operations lobbied for feasibility and predictability. When timelines slipped, critics cried capture. When updates landed, industry argued burden. The result was a standard that evolved, just slower than the market's memory. Across the Atlantic, the comparison became a talking point. The EU's organic regime differs, tighter in some areas, simply different in others. Soil is more central. Equivalency deals still let goods cross, but the divergences fed headlines. A product pulled in one market could remain on sale in another with slightly altered language. To consumers, that looked like duplicity. To regulators, it was the cost of sovereignty. Different parliaments, different compromises, same seal shape meaning different things at the edges. The SOE rule didn't end fraud, but it changed incentives. Getting certified as a handler costs money and time. Keeping records clean requires systems. Fraud thrives on low friction. Raise the friction and some schemes shift elsewhere. Honest operators felt the drag too, more forms, more audits, longer lead times, but many welcomed the burden because it leveled the field. If you're doing the work, you want your competitor forced to do it too. Litigation kept nudging the language landscape. No artificial preservatives morphed into no artificial preservatives added, a small hedge against trace carryover from upstream ingredients. Nothing artificial became no artificial flavors. Farm-raised swapped for from farms we trust. Each change reduced exposure without rewriting supply. The chilling effect was real. Some brands retired natural entirely, not out of conviction but caution. Why poke the bear when simple and real sell just as well? Enforcement after SOE looked different at the ports. Import certificates got checked more consistently. Inspectors had clearer triggers for deeper dives. A shipment with miraculous yields on paper attracted questions before it hit a silo. Still, no one imagined border science could divine a field's past. The system leaned into traceability. Who touched this, when, with which certificate? If the answers lined up, the product moved. If they didn't, holds and investigations followed. It wasn't perfect. It was closer to what the public assumed had been true all along. And underneath all of it, the aisle didn't stop. Packages kept whispering virtue. Courts kept refereeing words. Agencies kept inching definitions forward. The moving goalposts weren't a conspiracy. They were the outcome of a food system scaling faster than the rulebook, with economics pulling in one direction and ideals in another. Consumers adapted the way shoppers do, by reaching for cues that feel safe and by punishing brands that get caught. The next adaptation wouldn't come from a courtroom or a comment docket. It would come from a new set of promises trying to leap over organic entirely. The rise of beyond organic and new verification. When faith in one seal thins, new promises rush in. Beyond organic, regenerative, biodynamic. The pitch is simple. If organic started on the farm, these start in the ecosystem. Soil that holds water, fields that host insects, animals that move the way animals move. The hope is also simple. Fewer loopholes because the standard widens beyond inputs to outcomes. But broad promises attract broad problems, measurement, paperwork, and the same old incentives hiding in greener language. Regenerative sounded like a story everyone could root for. Measure soil carbon, reward farmers who build it, and let the market pay for climate repairs. The reality is messy. Soil carbon shifts with weather, depth, and sampling. One field can test up in May, down in August. A brand wants a number, an agronomist wants a trend, a farmer wants a premium that survives a drought. The compromise became practice-based checklists, cover crops, rotations, reduced tillage, animal integration, plus occasional soil tests. The signal moved from no GMOs to living roots in winter. It's progress, but it's still paperwork. Biodynamic is older and stricter at the farm gate. It layers cosmic calendars and compost preparations over organic rules, plus biodiversity requirements and on-farm fertility. It's hard to fake because it's hard to do. The downside is scale. Few farms carry the certification, and when they do, volumes are tight. A national yogurt maker might pilfer a sliver of biodynamic milk for a flagship SKU, but the rest of the line still leans on organic or conventional milk. The seal becomes a limited edition promise that lives next to a lot of ordinary. Enter the certification stack. The Regenerative Organic certification tried to solve the practice versus proof problem by nesting standards. You must be USDA Organic first, then meet soil, animal welfare, and social fairness tiers on top. Bronze, silver, gold steps that say we're climbing. It's clear and credible on paper. In execution, it stretches teams thin. Farm audits expand, worker interviews add time, and documentation grows a second spine. For a small processor, it's noble work with real costs, and no guarantee a retailer will pay for the extra seal. Meanwhile, the non-GMO project kept humming on the input side. For categories without GMO analogs, the butterfly felt redundant. For corn, soy, canola, and their derivatives, it gave shoppers a shortcut. It also didn't say anything about processing level. You could have a non-GMO, organic certified, regenerative aspiring snack that still behaves like all snacks in your bloodstream. That's not a con, it's a reminder. We keep building new lanes for farm practice, while the health lane keeps pointing to how much and how often you eat. Tech swooped in promising to clean the shadows. Satellite imagery flagged crop rotations from space. If a regenerative farm claims cover crops, the pixels should show green in winter. They often do, but the resolution is coarse and clouds don't care about audits. Blockchain arrived as a tamper-resistant ledger. If every handoff logs a lot, the record is harder to forge. It's only as good as the first entry. Garbage in, elegant garbage out, now with a QR code. Residue testing felt like a common-sense fix after grain scandals. Brands began spot testing lots for pesticide panels. It caught outliers and comforted buyers, but residues fade and a clean panel doesn't certify a method. Labs warned clients not to overpromise what numbers mean. Still, the tests became part of the new trust stack, not proof, but a pulse. Retailers built scorecards that leaned into virtue. Points for third-party validation, points for animal welfare tiers, points for packaging claims about recycled content. A public dashboard appeared on a corporate website with color bars marching upward year over year. Suppliers noticed that a single metric could move a listing meeting. The temptation to optimize the score built its own theater, swapping to a certified carton while the ingredient conversation stayed the same. Farmers felt the squeeze most. Better practices, worse paperwork. A rancher trying to rotate more often now tracks rest days, forage height, and rainfall. A row crop grower plants cover crops and then argues with a lender about yield risk when spring stays wet. The premiums arrive slowly through a buyer who wants a story and a signed affidavit. The agronomy works. The admin drags. Some walk away, not from the soil work, but from the stamp chase. Micro moment in a buyer meeting. We want regenerative oats. The supplier says, define regenerative. The buyer slides a checklist across the table. Cover crops, no-till or reduced-till, diverse rotations, verification by an approved program. The supplier nods, then asks, what's the delta you'll pay? Silence. The marketing team wants a claim. The finance team wants parity. Somewhere, a farmer hears the echo and plants rye anyway because it helps the field breathe, premium or no. There's a real upside to this scramble. When a brand ties a bonus to a measurable practice, acres under cover, days on pasture, antibiotics avoided unless medically necessary, behavior shifts. When a retailer commits to long contracts with region farms, those farms invest. The trick is building promises the public can verify without turning dinner into a legal briefing. So Beyond Organic isn't a single lane, it's a roundabout. Some exits lead to better farms, some dead end in performance art. The work now is restraint. Promise only what you can measure, fund what you want repeated, and resist the urge to fix trust with another sticker. Health outcomes versus label promises. Here, where expectations hit biology. When researchers look at what predicts weight gain, diabetes risk, and cardiovascular trouble, the strongest signal isn't the farm standard, it's processing level. Swap conventional chips for organic chips, and you've changed upstream inputs. You haven't changed the way a puff dissolves, how fast sugars absorb, or how little effort it takes to eat 400 calories before a traffic light turns green. The body notices structure, speed, and satiety more than seals. Ultra-processed food is a category built around engineering, refined starches, added sugars, isolated fats, emulsifiers, flavor systems, tuned for shelf life and frictionless eating. You can build that with organic ingredients and still get the same metabolic outcomes. Higher energy intake, blunted fullness, blood glucose spikes, and the quiet creep of insulin resistance over years. That doesn't make organic meaningless. It makes it incomplete for health if the form doesn't change. Taste tests show how labels tilt perception. Give two identical crackers to a panel, whisper organic, clean over one sample and regular over the other, and people report the organic one as lighter, fresher, less greasy. Then weigh the intake. Those same people often eat more when they think it's better for them. It's health washing at the table. The halo loosens brakes. Additives matter in context. Emulsifiers and certain sweeteners have been studied for effects on the gut barrier and microbiome in animals and small human trials. The findings point to a pattern. Some compounds in certain amounts in diets may shift microbial populations or mucus layers in ways that nudge inflammation. Organic rules restrict some inputs and allow others. The underlying question is it organic? But how often are you bathing your gut in engineered combination? Frequency, not a single emulsifier, usually decides outcomes. Pesticide exposure is where organic shows a clearer line. Biomonitoring studies consistently find that people who eat organic-heavy diets have lower urinary levels of certain pesticide metabolites. Farm workers in organic systems tend to face fewer synthetic pesticide exposures. That's a real benefit, especially for those closest to the field and for kids who are more sensitive per pound. But lower exposure isn't zero exposure, and it doesn't flip the script on processed forms. A child sipping organic fruit punch daily still faces the sugar roller coaster. Nutrients don't jump categories just because seeds did. The protein in organic chicken is still protein. The fiber in organic oats is still fiber. Some meta-analyses find modest differences, slightly higher antioxidant levels in some organic produce, slightly different fatty acid profiles in organic dairy. Useful, but not large enough to turn a cookie into a carrot. If your diet is mostly plants, minimally processed, loaded with legumes, grains, nuts, and a rotating cast of vegetables, the health signal is strong in any label language. The microbiome angle brings it home. Diversity in the gut tracks with diversity on the plate, varied fibers, fermented foods, less ultra-processing. An organic kimchi and a conventional kimchi both deliver microbes, acids, and plant compounds. Differences in residues and farming methods matter, but the structure and frequency matter more. If organic helps you buy more whole foods and cook more often, your microbiome will likely thank the habit, not the logo. A family story makes this concrete. After months of paying extra for organic versions of their usual snacks, a couple in Austin got frustrated. No weight change, same afternoon slumps. They tried a different rule for 30 days. Eat organic when it's produced on the high residue lists or animal products they can source well, but focus most of their energy on cutting ultra-processing. Out went daily snack bars and boxed sweet. In came cooked beans, eggs, yogurt with fruit, toasted sourdough, handfuls of nuts. Same calories, roughly, same seal count, fewer. 2 weeks in, the dad noticed he wasn't prowling the pantry at 9 p.m. The mom's headaches eased. Their kids still loved treats. Now they were Saturday projects, cookies from a bowl instead of a bag. Nothing magical, just structure over stickers. Where organic does intersect with health more directly is at the farm worker and community level. Fewer synthetic pesticides in the spray means fewer acute poisonings, fewer chronic exposures. Better manure management and rotations can improve local water quality. Those are public health gains even if your biometrics don't shift from an organic toaster pastry. When you pay the premium on staples that are close to the farm, produce, dairy, eggs, meat, you're more likely to fund those upstream wins. So what choices move the needle? Think in layers. Layer 1, processing. Choose foods that look like their origin or that have short ingredient lists you could keep in a home kitchen. Layer 2, category impact. If you eat produce daily, organic often makes a bigger exposure difference there than it does on a rarely eaten condiment. Layer 3, animal products. If you buy meat, milk, or eggs, the farming system behind them affects more than your meal. Layer 4, habits. Cook a little more. Assemble a little less. Save the fancy seals for places where they change the farm reality, not as a pass for snacks that run your appetite for you. The label can be part of the plan. It just can't be the plan. Organic solves for how we treat land, water, and animals. Health responds to what we make from those ingredients and how often we lean on factories to feed us. When you align the two, better farms, simpler food, you stop asking a sticker to do a job it never promised to do. A practical playbook for viewers. Let's turn this from theory into groceries. Start with a rule that never blinks. Red ingredients, not claims. Fronts of packages are billboards, backs are contracts. 4 quick checks. 1, length. Shorter lists usually mean less engineering. 2, order. Sugar has many names. If it's top 3, it's candy. 3, function. If an ingredient exists to stabilize, emulsify, color, or flavor, ask how often you want that tool running your meal. 4, translation. If you wouldn't keep it in a home kitchen, why is it in your weekday food? Next, pick your battles. Organic matters more in some categories than others because exposure and system impact differ. Higher priority. Thin-skinned produce eaten frequently, berries, leafy greens, apples, staples your kids inhale, peanut butter, oats, and animal products if you buy them, milk, eggs, meat, because the farming system behind those animals affects residues, antibiotics, and welfare. Lower priority. Things you barely use, vinegar, spices you sprinkle, thick-skinned produce you peel, avocados, bananas, and shelf-stable condiments where total intake is small and the processing level dominates the health story anyway. Don't chase a seal on a soda, reduce soda. Think in processing, not just purity. A simple swap list beats 1,000 labels. Breakfast. Trade boxed organic cereal for cooked oats with fruit and nuts. If hot cereal won't fly, choose a muesli or granola with oil, oats, nuts, and a touch of sweet, not a parade of syrups and flavors. Snacks. Move from bars to real food. Roasted nuts, cheese, and fruit. Yogurt you sweeten yourself. Popcorn you pop in oil with salt. Drinks. Replace juice boxes with water, seltzer with citrus, or unsweet iced tea. Save juice for a small glass with a meal. Sweets. Bake a batch. Make it an event, not a background drip. Build a trustworthy shortlist the way restaurants build purveyors. Start local where possible. Visit a farmer's market twice and ask boring questions. Who owns the farm? Do you grow what you sell? Are you certified? And if not, what practices do you use instead? Certification is a tool. Practices are the point. Join a CSA if the rhythm works for you. It forces seasonal cooking and supports a real farm through the lean weeks. If you buy meat, find a local butcher who can tell you which farms supply them and how often animals are on pasture. Co-ops and small grocers often know their suppliers by name. Chains sometimes do too, but you'll need to ask. Notice patterns. Brands that answer specifics quickly, animal days on pasture, pesticide avoidance practices, third-party audits are usually doing the work. Brands that send vibes, real, wholesome, crafted, without details are usually selling vibes. Put 3 responsive brands on a personal safe list per category and default there when you're tired. When you do buy processed foods, vet the brand the way auditors vet suppliers. Look for a statement of standards beyond legal minimums. Do they publish their approved ingredient list and what they exclude? Do they conduct batch-level residue tests on high-risk ingredients and share ranges, not just slogans? Will they tell you they're co-packers and certifiers if you ask? Do they publish a recall history and corrective action? A brand that treats you like a stakeholder is rarer than a brand that treats you like a target. Batch tests aren't perfect, but they're a signal. If a grain-heavy brand publishes periodic pesticide panels with methods and detection limits, it's a sign of systems thinking. If a dairy brand shares antibiotic test protocols and failure procedures, same. You're not looking for a guarantee. You're looking for evidence that someone upstream is awake at 3 a.m. when valves stick and plans go sideways. Cook 1 more time per week than you do now. That single change lowers your exposure to ultra-processing more than swapping to organic versions of everything you already eat. Keep a short rotation, a pot of beans, a tray of roasted vegetables, a whole chicken or a block of tofu, a big batch of grains. Use them all week. The goal isn't chef work, it's assembly with better building blocks. Make a staples map for your kitchen. Column 1, often. Whole vegetables and fruits, legumes, eggs, plain yogurt, nuts, seeds, intact grains, tinned fish, olive oil, spices. Column 2, sometimes. Sourdough cheese, cured meats, dark chocolate, honey. Column 3, rare. Any product where sugar, refined starch, and oil meet flavor systems and emulsifiers to vanish in your mouth, organic or not. Shop your map, not your mood. For kids, change context, not lectures. Move sweets to a Saturday bake, make drinks boring by default, and teach label reading as a game. Find the sugar synonyms, count the thickeners, spot the natural flavor. Let them choose a treat with open eyes. They learn faster than we do. Finally, accept trade-offs without guilt. If you can afford organic for the categories that matter most, do it and skip the stickers where it doesn't. If you can't, focus on processing level and cooking. If you eat animal products, buy fewer, better. If you don't, rotate plant proteins to keep diversity high. Ask brands questions and notice who answers. Reward boring transparency over glossy virtue. You won't shop perfectly. That's fine. The wins stack when habits stack. Simpler food, fewer engineered snacks, targeted organics where they matter, and a short list of brands and farms you trust because they've earned it. The label can guide you. Your routine will save you. Follow the money. Retail, ads, and placement. Walk the store with a buyer and you'll see the economics under the halo. End caps aren't decoration, they're billboards with rent. Slotting fees buy that rent, upfront payments to secure space, facings, and favorable resets. A product that pays moves from the Siberia of the bottom shelf to hand height. Add a themed display, fresh start, wellness week, clean living, and you've bought a story frame too. The same cereal tastes more healthy when it's stacked under a green banner. It isn't taste, it's placement. Retailers love categories that climb price ladders. A planogram isn't just organization, it's a narrative arc from bargain to better to best. Organic usually anchors best. When the average basket shifts a few dollars because an aisle leans premium, the store wins before a single ad runs. That's mix. End caps and eye-level facings turn mix into money. Brands fight for those inches because inches shape perception and perception moves unit. Private label discovered a cheat code. Copy the badge, undercut the price, harvest the margin you no longer pay a national brand. A retailer's own organic line borrows the design language, matte craft, lowercase type, soft greens, and parks right beside the pioneer. Same shelf, cheaper tag, familiar seal. The store wins twice, higher total margin and leverage over suppliers suddenly begging to keep space. That leverage flows upstream as cost-down emails, meet our price or lose facing. Someone pays. Often it's the grower or the small processor. Behind the shelf, ad tech rewires persuasion. Loyalty cards, apps, and digital coupons feed a profile. What you buy, when, at what price, what you pair. Retail media networks sell that attention back to brands. Pay here and your organic soup rises to the top of the app search, a push notification pings at 5 p.m., and a digital shelf tag blinks green on Tuesday. It's the new end cap, personalized, invisible, targeted down to a household that overindexes on natural. Seasonal reset is the cleanest script. January turns aisles into sanctuaries. New year, new you banners lift anything labeled organic, protein, or plant forward. By March, the set shifts to spring clean, detox teas, no artificial snacks, kombucha towers. September launches back to better lunches, boxes of bite-sized virtue in compostable-looking bags. Scarcity gets engineered too. Limited run flavors, online-only packs, small batch dropped. Urgency drives trial. Trial feeds algorithms that place you higher next reset. Claim stacking is a sales meeting in bullet points. A buyer scrolls a deck, non-GMO, organic, certified humane, plastic-neutral, carbon-compensated shipping. Each batch buys a talking point. Each talking point buys a reason to say yes. The danger is that stacking can become camouflage, more symbols to scan while the product remains an ultra-processed snack. Retailers know it. They also know shoppers respond to symbols faster than to panel. A micro story from a mid-sized brand. They refused to add all natural to a legacy product after legal advised against it. The buyer hinted an end cap would be easier with something clean up front. The brand held the line. At the next reset, they lost a facing to a competitor that splashed nothing artificial across the top. Same formulation, different copy. Sales dipped and the brand started drafting simple ingredients for spring. The line between ethics and survival turned out to be a price break on corrugate and 3 inches of cardboard. Store scorecards push compliance through aesthetics. A retailer's sustainability team issues points for recyclable packaging, recycled content, and clean label adherence. Buyers use the score to break ties. Vendors repaint boxes, switch to paper-based films, and adjust callouts. Sometimes the product improves, less plastic, clearer labels. Sometimes it's theater, heavier paper wraps around the same food chemistry. The score goes up. The food doesn't change. Follow the money into promo calendars. A lift in January requires trade spend, temporary price reductions, buy one get one mechanics, coupons stacked with app offers. The brand funds the drop, the retailer counts the volume. For a premium organic SKU, the math only works if base price stays high enough to afford dips. The result is a pricing seesaw, high anchor, frequent deals that keeps the item feeling special while training you to chase the strike-through. Data science now casts the aisle before a box ships. A retailer models a set. If we add 2 private label organics, remove 1 underperforming national item, and devote an end cap to better for you, category profit per linear foot rises 7%. The reset prints. A brand with a weaker velocity gets cut even if their standards are stronger. Velocity beats virtue because rent is due on time. Small brands try to hack the system with community. Demo relentlessly, spark word of mouth, build a pocket of loyal buyers so dense the retailer notices store numbers. It can work until a national brand copies the SKU architecture, funds a nationwide end cap, and rents the attention you earned. Scale wins again. This is why the halo survives even as faith wobbles. The shelf is an attention economy with toll booths. Money places stories where eyes land. Retailers optimize for margin per foot and add dollars per click. Brands optimize for paid visibility and the right adjectives on cardboard. In that loop, organic is both a belief and a business model. The belief says better farming. The business model says better placement. And it loops us back to that snack from the start. It didn't win the cart by taste alone. It rented the aisle, borrowed the look, and rode the signals you trust, right up to the word that meant less than you thought. The unraveling, paying off the opening mystery. We traced that 100% natural, snack to a tiny line item, a solvent-derived carrier embedded in a natural flavor, legal here, disallowed under EU guidance. Equivalency didn't cover it. The importer swapped phrasing, not formula. The brand issued a careful statement. The retailer quietly reworded the box. Parents filed a complaint. Regulators sent non-binding guidance. Today, same recipe, new language that says less and means the same. Resolution and meaning. Labels are proxies, and proxies are gameable. The real work lives in practices, proofs, and your habits. Want receipts, names, and documents? Watch our follow-up deep dive next. Subscribe for investigations brands hope you scroll past, and share this with a friend who swears natural means safe. New episodes weekly.